We will not be talking about submersibles.
Cool. Oh,
on this program.
That changes all of my thing. Let me just go and delete everything.
Oh, okay. Can you make some show notes about that? Fascinating from a human factors perspective. I will give it that.
I think once the dust has settled a little bit, I do think we will be coming back and reviewing this at some point.
I feel like it's got to be one of the stories. Yeah.
It's there's just so much around it. But anyway, that's not for now. Yes, another time. But tonight's story is a story.
Very cool.
Is it?
Maybe.
It might be.
It's cool. So full transparency mode here. Like I took a look at this story and was like, oh yeah, that looks cool. I'll throw that up in the top stories. Fully not anticipating this one to be the one that was selected, as I do from time to time. Just kind of throw in an extra floater in there to see. And of course it gets chosen. And I'm sitting here going, what is there to talk about with this story?
So I like, I don't do that much gaming, as we've sort of talked about before, because I'm just not that cool and I'm not that dumb with kids. But when it comes to training and using in synthetics, in synthetic training environments, that's where I'm quite interested in this. Think that's
beyond, like, I can get excited. That's the thing for me is, like, I can get excited about the video game applications, and then it's the other stuff that I'm excited for too. I mean, I think about training. Training was the first thing that came to my mind, but also, I think that's the only thing that came to my mind.
Well, we've been doing a fair bit of investigative work at the moment around chatbots and chat AIs and things like that. So for me, this is a kind of it's a step change on that. So if you're in the metaverse, if such a thing still exists, then is this really what we're talking about? Is almost chatbot AIs, chatbot personas, because it sort of is, and then if you're
there's a connection that I made to this that actually made me really excited about this story, and it came from one of the segments today, and it's a question about the voice assistants that really made me think about this in a different way, because I think there's some interesting things that happen with chatbots and voice enabled AIs that I will hold off on the commentary, because like it is actually a really cool, interesting point that I want to make, and I want to make sure that it's on the actual episode. Right now we're in the pre-show, so we can talk about other things like, where the heck have we been for the last 3 weeks?
Well, I've got to be honest, cards on the table, I just couldn't be bothered and said, you know what, I'll just leave it out there. No, that's last week I was driving north, and so I got use of I'd love to say a luxury villa, but it wasn't. It was my grandparents' bungalow, but it up north in Cumbria, so basically just below Scotland in the UK. And so went up there with my kids, and then Amanda joined me a bit later on. And so I worked up there. And at the time, I went up on the last Thursday, and I didn't think that we would have any connectivity at all up there. So that's why I was like, look, I just don't think I can do it. I can't. Although there's a huge risk of me.
Why try?
Yeah, I was in huge, because I had no way of knowing, even if I'd be able to communicate with you to say, actually, I can't do it or whatever. We were just like, and what time I would get up there, and etc. etc. So we're just like, look, let's be grown up about this and just say, I can't do it this week. But where were we at the week before? What was the week before?
You were gone the week before too.
Oh, I was doing the it was the CIHF trustee and exec meetings. I was out with our human factors posse. Again, we thought about potentially doing some dialing stuff. There's some elements there that I understand now. I just see like the private chat going. I'm like, I've got no idea what you're talking about, and then I know I've just worked out what you're talking about. So we had I chaired my first proper trustee meeting with the CIHF, which was quite. I mean, it's not the first one I've actually chaired. I chaired a couple when I was president elect, but it just felt different when you're doing it as the president. So that was quite cool. That was quite interesting. And then that night we went out for tapas. Hence why I couldn't.
Right. I mean, we had discussed potentially going and getting like a live thing from there. Look, it takes two, because it was clearly on me too to find a replacement or a stand-in. I don't like saying replacement. I like saying a panelist for the show. And it was the season of burnout on my end too, and it just so convenient for those 2 weeks to just not do a show. And I was gonna make a joke about being more risk averse with doing a live show than getting in a submersible, but I think that's in bad taste. So I think to that end, I won't make that comparison.
No, don't do that when we live, because that'd be awful. So, oh shoot. So it's been a minute since we've
yes, it has. It has.
So, and then there's going to be. I think that I've got another couple of things, because I need to get my diary be much better organized, because I've realized everything is coming in thick and fast at the moment. And I don't know whether there was an event I wanted to go to today and I couldn't go to it. And there's a couple of other bits and bobs, but yes, this whole being organized thing is not me. It's not doing me any favors at the moment.
Someone might even say challenging. Well, what a treat we have here in our backstage. That's what we call this thing. We call it backstage.
Oh.
We have one of our lab members is joining us. Alex. Let's bring Alex in. Hi, Alex.
Hello.
Hey, Alex. How are you?
Hi. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you guys again. It's been a sad couple of weeks without both of you.
Oh, you're so nice. How much do we pay you for saying that? Just.
I'll invoice you later.
Say we pay. All right. We don't do that. No, it's a good time. What are your thoughts on the story tonight? Are you excited to talk about it? How long do we have you for? All that stuff?
You can have me for as long as you like today, conveniently. My interest is piqued, but I don't know that it's all good things that my interest is piqued by. I've got, and okay. I threw some notes, some commentary in there as well, but my brain defaults to kind of the inequity that already exists in these spaces and how that's just going to expand further out. But it's cool. I mean, it's cool to have access to this tech. It's cool to have, as like a default human being, all of these fun, exciting new things that come up with it. But if you're not kind of like a default settings human being with other things happening, it's less exciting because it's something less that you have access to. Those are my
That's fair. Okay. I see where you're coming from with that.
I'm trying to
like not cart before the horse here with the full show, right?
Yeah. it's a story that for me I've got to dig quite deep to get excited by. I don't know whether it's just because, as I said earlier, because I'm not really a gamer. Therefore, obviously, the initial interest of this is at gaming, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever. However, and I was thinking, well, how much if you started having AI conversations in Minecraft? Now that I could get excited by, because Minecraft is probably the only real. Well, there's a couple, but Minecraft is what I'm currently hooked on, and the only real game I play. So if there's a bit about that, then that could be sort of interesting, but then it'd be kind of weird. Maybe you could talk to the villagers and stuff like that. That when you're trading, maybe. But that's for the rest of it, not so much. But put it in the trade.
I mean, I think you got it right there, Barry. I mean, that's like the. Geez, I'm really trying not to spoil some of my thoughts later on down the line here because.
Don't peek early. Don't peek early. We don't do it.
Don't do it.
Not after a vacation. You can do that in normal stuff, but
the applications of being able to speak with NPCs, and let's just say by extension, training,
things,
training agents. Let's call them training agents because that's more representative of what they actually do. Speak with training agents or digital agents in video games, and we'll just call them digital agents to generalize. There's so many cool things that you can do. And I think about this in the same way that you prime ChatGPT to do something for you. I want you to act as, right? I will give you this, and it'll be your job to do that. Okay? Right. So just think about that for a minute. All right? I want you.
This was going to be the first one that we wouldn't get ChatGPT into, but you've loved.
Okay, no. Just think about it, because what we're essentially talking about here with NVIDIA, they're bringing in these large language models to use AI to generate speech based on this character. So you can prime these characters with this large backstory, and basically say, I want you to act as the ruler of this kingdom. This kingdom has the XYZ. Give them all the backstory. And then, you may be interacted with by a player character. It is your job to stay in character and respond as only the ruler would, right? And so you come up to the ruler of this land, and they're able to speak to you and make up almost a little bit of history based on their knowledge, right? And maybe their job isn't to create history. That is the writer's job. But for it to respond to you in ways that it didn't anticipate or the writers didn't anticipate. Can you imagine having a voice interface where you are in VR or whatever, metaverse, you brought it up. You walk up to somebody and you say something, and they react to exactly what you said in character, that they have a goal. Like, so I'm thinking about this in a variety of different dimensions here. One dimension I'm thinking about this is, how do you prime those digital agents? Well, one, you say your goal is to set the player character up with a quest to do X, Y, and Z. Okay? And here's your backstory. This is who you are as a character. Now, whatever language you say in there has to be within your character, something your character would say. And always gear the conversation. Your goal as this character is to get that player character on the quest. And so everything that you say, or everything that NPC says, is going to be in service of trying to guide the conversation to the ultimate quest. And so these quests can seem more natural in some ways, right? Like you have the person that's just sitting on the side of the road with a broken wheel on their cart or something, and they need a repair, for example. And you could walk up to them and say, "What's up?" And they're like, "My cart's broken." That's what's up. And they do it all in character. And so this is what's fascinating to me, is that the way that you prime these things, the way that they have different responses to your free-flowing text or speech or whatever form of input that you provide, is going to be really cool for a lot of applications. And I don't think, I mean, it's easy to like look at this and say, oh yeah, AI and NPCs, fine, whatever. Cool. Training, fine. But until we actually see how this performs, I think that is when this is going to something's really going to click. Because I feel like I've been talking and ranting. This is the last thing I'll say. Because the application for this goes beyond just NPCs in video games. It goes beyond training materials. This could also be chatbots for any service out there, any troubleshooting. You are a customer service agent. Your goal is to make the customer happy. You're a cashier. Your goal is to check out with, efficiently and accurately the person here. You are a digital assistant.
My thinking looking through this was that it was going to be, like that decision tree kind of model that you are, regardless, they are only able to respond with X, Y, and Z. So I guess in my head, I was seeing it as more of like an illusion, which I know is talked about a little bit in the articles, but an illusion of having a real interactive conversation, which I'm sure it will go much deeper. I mean, we already see, other countries have these like holobots that can do anything and everything except for shake your hand. Still have very strong opinions on some of the facets of this. Other parts of it I think are really cool. You guys didn't touch much on like the healthcare aspect that could exist from this technology within the notes, so I added my own stuff in there about it. Awesome. That would make that very, very cool to see in live time happening.
Well, let's talk about it. Why don't you bring it up now?
Yeah, so recently family hospitalization happened. We were in this room. We're waiting for this doctor to come in. And they wheel in this massive, like Gladys from Portal style robot, stick it in the corner of the room. It's all folded up. It unfolds itself as this nurse clicks a button. And on the other end is the physician that is doing the initial assessment at the time. And there's a box in front of them. And within that box is a stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, leads to like run an EKG, all kinds of things. So there's a physical body in the room with us. There's the doctor on the other side of the screen. And the physical person is there to place the leads, to place the stethoscope, to place, whatever. While in live time on the other side of the screen, the physician is getting all of this data, is hearing in live time the heartbeat, is watching the vitals as they happen. It was a very interesting experience to see firsthand, but I would think that something like this might be able to take that a little bit further if someone is able to like self-prompt whatever person is sitting in front of them, or if we go into the realm, and what I thought of at first was speech therapy and other occupational therapies. Burnout exists very quickly in those fields, especially when you're working with children in speech therapy, and it's very difficult to have children conceptualize things that we as adults, it's second nature, especially when learning language. If you have an AI that's never going to visibly show that they're frustrated or exhausted while teaching a child to make, the O sound or the S sound, that's probably going to go a million times further than the human being that's standing there that is getting exhausted or tired, or, not to say those people do amazing and wonderful things. I've seen speech therapy happen in front of my own eyes. It is fabulous. But at the end of the day, when there's a therapist that is engaging with 20 plus children in a single day, at a point, just being human, it gets tiring. And it you want to maintain dignity in healthcare spaces, and you don't want to make people feel bad that they're not meeting your expectation as the care provider, but it happens. This, I think, would get rid of that piece, but it would also have to be modeled off of real therapy providers in that space. And likely, I think on the back end, it would turn into a situation where there still are those providers. This is a fill-in thing, and they are able to utilize, review, transcribe, do whatever the next step in treatment would be for that person.
I want to explore that whole experience that you had in that.
It was wild.
I mean, there must have been a play on emotions there, because obviously it was a loved one who was in there, and so you made sure that was all there. But also, were you just geeking out slightly at the fact that you had this amazing robot in there doing things?
So I took pictures specifically to send to you guys, but I haven't edited them yet, so I could remove the family member out of the photo. It was very cool. It was super strange. My grandparents who were there had absolutely no concept of what was happening, and they were very confused. And automatically, when someone would speak, this robot, not the physician on the other end of it, would track to where the noise was coming from. Mm-hmm. So it was looking dead at you, the screen that the physician was staring right at you. And it didn't stop there, because there was more hospital things that came a little bit later. There was a robot babysitter at one point. It was this giant, looked kind of like one of those, you see the Google cars running around with a big old ball on top. It was one of those things. Still had somebody operating it on the back end, but it did very similar things. It would orient itself to where sound was coming from. If you were doing something it didn't like, it would scream very loudly at you. It was a very unique hospital experience, that's for sure.
That's really interesting, though, to see, certainly from what you said from your grandparents' reaction. That's something that we're going to have to, if we are getting more and more robots, more and more technical intervention, it is going to be that whole, how do we make sure that the digital divide doesn't further divide generations? Because we have so many people who are, there's a lot of what we call silver surfers who are down with technology, but there's a lot who aren't. And therefore, how do we make sure that those people aren't excluded? Because some people might look at it and go, well, okay, I don't like it, but I'll deal with it. But other people might just turn around and say, nope, I'm not dealing with that whatsoever. And how do we deal with that? Because as much as I love technology, and I really do, I could easily imagine that if there's something, if you're in pain, if you're in whatever, you're not well, there's nothing worse than feeling not well and in pain, and then having something that you can't relate to come up to you, and then you do lots of bad language would ensue, I'm sure. So
yeah, like at what point, what is the threshold for no, bring a human?
Yeah,
like.
Yeah. I mean, not that it'll do any better or any different. It's probably more efficient, but and more effective. Right. But there's a time when you just want that human empathy, isn't there? But maybe there's other times when you absolutely don't. When you may be going in for maybe the slightly more embarrassing incident or something like that. You're like, oh, I've got the robot. Thank goodness for that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, time and place.
Some of the family members spent the next couple of days being very stressed out about, does that mean they have all of this on video somewhere now and it can be accessed by lots of people? It wasn't there weren't any consents or anything that had to be signed in that space for like review of recordings later, nothing like that. They still did not understand what that looks like. Being 82 years old, you're probably not going to, if you don't have a very large touch into technology. They also were slightly concerned about how excited I was and how many pictures I was taking of both of these like different machines at different times. Because I was like, this is the neatest thing. I've got to show so many people. This is so cool.
So, I think I'm quite intrigued. Because again, you're right in terms of is it being recorded and stuff, but actually that would be terribly useful, wouldn't it? Because if if you turn around and said, well, I told the machine, or I told the physician through the machine to do X, Y, Z, and then you could actually go back and say, well, no, you didn't, or no, this is the information I was given in order to come up with this diagnosis, etc., etc., etc. There's there could be, and when we talked about AI being able to do diagnostics and things like that, being able to record that stuff and then go back and say, right, it came to this result because of X, Y, Z. That would be quite clever and useful. I'm all intrigued by that. I almost want to be ill or something and be able to go just to be on the receiving end, but that'd be quite sadistic. So no, I don't do that actually. I don't think we've got as cooler things like that in the UK anyway. Unless somebody wants to prove me wrong and send me photos.
I don't even know where to put this. You just brought up a great point that I don't want to like lose, and
that doesn't happen often. So
okay, I'm just gonna put it there. All
right.
right.
We've been talking so much cool stuff. I don't know whether I've done my notes. I don't think I'm too worried too much about the it came from. So I can do that off the.
Cool. Take that off.
I like the second one.
The second what?
The second it came from.
Oh. It's been weeks since I pulled them, and I don't even know if the links work anymore because of all the Reddit stuff going on.
You mean all the Reddit stuff? There's stuff going on.
Well, so the long and short of it is that Reddit is increasing their pricing for access to its API, which results in a headache for a number of third-party applications. And it's unreasonable in a lot of ways, and so there's protesting happening across many subreddits. You may have seen an increase in John Oliver pictures across the platform. They went dark for a couple days. Some subreddits are still private. So like that's in so many words, just that's what's going on. So I don't know how the human factors, UX research, all the normal subreddits that we peruse for these it came froms, how they've been affected. Thankfully, we have one from TikTok today, which is a rarity, but great. So, all right. Well, hey, we're just a couple minutes out. So, Alex, I think we'll say bon voyage for now.
Great. I'm sending in the general lab chat some of these pictures. So the very first one is the babysitter robot.
Once you've had a chance to edit them, you should throw them in the general chat for the entire Discord so that everyone can see them.
I might. It's the second one of like the physician on the other side. You can see this black box that's there that looks like a lockbox. That is where all of the blood pressure cuffs, the stethoscope, everything came out of that went on the person. It was so cool and so strange.
I expected slightly more humanoid features in it.
No.
It looks like a shower stand with a CCTV on it.
That is, and what's interesting is when I took the photo, without taking the photo, I could not see, I don't know if that's the tracking itself or like an infrared camera, that little purple circle at the top does not exist to the naked eye in any way.
Okay, so that'll be the infrared tracking.
That's IR, yeah.
But so yeah, it was crazy. The hospitals here are wild.
Yes, we'll give everybody some incentive. Post that in our Discord, so everyone listening and watching can go and view that. Because that's pretty cool. Blur out the faces maybe, but I think other than that, yeah, that's some cool tech. Give some context. So you brought it up during the pre-show, and I'll provide a little linky to that later.
Will do.
Cool. Well, thanks, Alex. Thank you for joining us in our pre-show and for bringing those points up. We'll definitely bring up some of those points during the main show, and we'd love to have you back if you want to hang out with us for the post-show too.
Sure, I'll be around.
All right. Yay! All right. Well, thanks to Alex, and we are going to take a little quick break, and we'll be back to do the first show that we've done in 3 weeks?
Months, years.
Months, years. It feels like years. How do I podcast? I don't know. I forgot. We'll figure it out. Bye.
Welcome to Human Factors Cast, your weekly podcast for human factors, psychology, and design.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Human Factors Cast. We're recording this episode live on June 22nd, 2023. This is episode 286. Like I said, this is Human Factors Cast. I'm your host, Nick Roome. I'm joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby.
Hello, and it's good to be back after such a long break.
It has been a long break, and we're still figuring out how to come back to podcasting. So stick with us. We got a great show for you. We're going to be talking about NVIDIA's generative AI, and even beyond that, some AI applications to NPCs and all that fun stuff. Allows gamers to converse with NPCs, and we'll talk about some more of the applied human factors-y stuff. Later on, we'll be taking some questions from the community, including what you've done in human factors and your thoughts on voice agents and voice user interfaces. But first, we have some programming notes. Yes, like Barry said, we took a little unplanned summer hiatus, but we're back. We're back. And I usually do this at the very end of the show, but since we're back for the first time, if you'd like to leave us a review, tell your friends about us, or support us on Patreon, we'd appreciate any and all of those. So maybe consider doing that. But Barry, I have to know, what is the latest? What's been going on over at 1202?
So at 1202, we were talking about artificial intelligence in hospitals. Kate Preston, friend of the show, she's been on this show with us before, and she's doing her PhD around the use of artificial intelligence in hospitals. And we had a really great discussion around, I thought we'd get into the nitty gritty of the tech side of things, but actually there was a load of, funny enough, human factors stuff that came up around organization and some of the things that are inhibiting the use of the use of AI that is got nothing to do with the technology itself. So really fascinating, live now, and totally recommend you go and have a listen.
Thanks for that, Barry. And just one more, I guess, thing here at the top. If you haven't been joining us for our pre and post shows online, we do these live every Thursday. We have a pre-show and a post-show. Tonight's pre-show was especially great because we had one of our lab members, Alex, on with us, and they were bringing up a bunch of great points about the story that we're about to talk about. And so you're missing like half the conversation if you're not sticking with us on our live shows. So come join us on all platforms that you can find us on every Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. That's what, 10 p.m. your time, UK time?
10 p.m. UK time, yes.
We'll come do that. Anyway, for now, let's go ahead and get into this news story. That's right. This is a part of the show all about human factors news. Barry, what is the story this week?
So this week, NVIDIA's generative AI lets gamers converse with NPCs. So NVIDIA has revealed Avatar Cloud Engine, or ACE, a new technology that allows gamers to have natural conversations with video game non-playable characters, NPCs, and receive appropriate responses. ACE can run both in the cloud and locally using large language models that can be tailored with character backstories and lore, whilst using guardrails to avoid inappropriate conversations. The technology also uses NVIDIA's Riva, a speech recognition and speech-to-text tool, and Omniverse audio-to-face to create facial animations that match any speech track. NVIDIA partnered with Convey to build a demo called Kairos, starring a playable character in a dystopian raiment shop. During the demo, the player has a natural conversation with an NPC named Jin. The dialogue is not perfect, but the idea shows that the players can just speak into their headsets and the NPC will reply appropriately. Though NVIDIA did not announce any games that will use the technology, Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl, and Fort Solis will employ Omniverse audio-to-face. Although the demo's visuals are more compelling than the AI dialogue, ACE is an exciting technology that has many implications for the human factors profession, including game design and development, psychology, and ergonomics. So, Nick, is this going to be the perfect thing that when we decide to take 2 weeks off, we'll just take over for everything and do a full podcast NPC style?
Maybe if we instruct it to act as us. Look, so I do want to comment on a couple things here. We are reporting on this reporting is by Engadget, and we are working off of two different articles tonight, although it only links to one of them in the show notes. And I want to just level set here. So we have the NVIDIA news, and that's just like a little snippet of some of the things that they're talking about. Engadget did post a follow up article to this about AIs and generative AI in bringing tomorrow's NPCs to life. And this article that is posted has sort of an overview of where it's been, where it's at today, and where it's going. And so I just wanted to contextualize the stuff that we're going to talk about today is through both lenses. We'll be talking about the tech. We'll be talking about potentially how this is done. We'll also be talking about the applications, not only within video games, but beyond video games. So with that context out of the way, this is cool. I'm glad you all wanted to hear about this one. I felt earlier like I had nothing to talk about with this because it's like, yes, okay, fine. Yes, they're AIs, NPCs, makes sense. Great. Cool. Move on. But that really just opened up a lot of can of worms, as some of these often innocuous stories tend to do. And I mean, this, to me, the human factors applications of this are immediately apparent when you look at anything involving something like training. It might make training much better, but it also might make it much worse in some instances. And it's interesting to explore those, and we will. But then there's also sort of this risk of creating realistic, but maybe misleading or harmful conversations within the context. And given this, idyllic scenario where these guardrails are put in place and everything's fine, you're not going to go off those guardrails, then it's not an issue. But when you start implementing it into, it's the same risk that you have with most generative AI with large language models. I am curious where your thoughts on this one are, Barry.
So for me, I think a lot of it is if we scope it right. So what are NPCs actually for? They add some flavor, some extra filler almost to games. Some of them have a more distinct role in making sure that you get the right prompts and things like that. But it is very mandrolic. It's they just say what they're meant to say within the game's boundary, and they fill the space. So to get a bit more realism into the way that they talk, into the way that they engage, that's cool. I think that's going to be quite decent. But I guess for all transparency, I don't really play games. I've sort of played them in the past, but not the sort of games that have like NPCs and engaging. So I was like, almost a bit like what you said earlier in terms of this is going to be a tough one for me to talk about. But a lot of the work I have done is within the synthetic training space, and I do think there is a lot of value here in that, because you have particularly if you're going to do, say, some work around infantry training and things like that, where you might interact with the local populace, and you might not do something that is entirely structured. So most games have a structure into the way that they're developed. The game designers want you to go down a certain way and do a certain thing. Whereas when you're using these things for synthetic training, it tends to be a bit broader. It tends to be, if you want to do something slightly more out of the box with NPCs that would actually be a bit more interactive, it means that you could actually allow that to happen rather than it have to be a structured training session. You could actually say, if somebody decides to go and wander up over a hill and see if they could come round to a target in a different way, using this type of technology, you could do that. You could allow them to do that without having to tap them on the shoulder and say, "Oh, very well, but could you just go back down the hill because that's where we want you to go?" So there's a lot of things there that I think it could be useful. I guess to look at almost not negatives, but considerations would be, if you've got these NPCs that are doing a bit more stuff, what does that do for the gameplay planning and development and things like that? Good. Not being involved in game and design development, I don't really know, but it feels like it would almost make the job harder, or it's got the potential for making that job harder. And then look on a more of a social side, I know that the younger generations now get criticized for doing less and less face-to-face human interaction, because a lot more is happening online, and a lot of this is happening through games like this, like when you're doing uh, warfare games and that type of thing. You're working together as a team. There's a whole lot of people online with headsets and that type of thing. If the non-player characters are doing a really good job of pretending to be human, why do you need to then wait online for all your mates to be online to have a really good gaming experience? Could all of your squad actually just all be NPCs and actually them do that really, really well? And so we were actually losing. My argument has always been, well, actually, as long as you're communicating, whether it's online or it's face to face, it doesn't matter. We need to get over ourselves. This could actually ruin a lot of that human to human interaction potentially. Anyway, that was a very long
I want to,
round.
yeah, I was, not to get down the rabbit hole already, but I want to comment on that, because what if we craft these interactions that are more enjoyable than human interactions?
Well,
What if, like, seriously?
yeah. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, if you've got somebody on your team who's maybe not playing the way that you want to play, maybe they're being a bit disruptive, maybe they're being slightly annoying or whatever it is, and you end up having a row with them, and like, why can't you play the game properly? Why can't you're not taking it seriously as the rest of us? Or maybe you've got 2 or 3 people in your squad who play just a different style to you, and you find that a bit irritating. Why do you need to put up with any of that? You could craft your own perfect team that plays the style that you want to say. If you want to be the hero, they're the ones that they're providing you covering fire all the time, and you're the one going up and getting, they're basically looking after you. Or you might style somebody else as the hero type of character, or whatever, So yeah, I think there's lots that on the face of it could be seen as a really good thing, but then also there's a potential for it to. We do sometimes stray into the negative in when we're reviewing AI type stuff, but it's so easy to do because I think everyone gets bought into the hype of, oh, it's amazing, it's going to do everything, it's going to solve problem, and then we're into human extinction. So
Let me get some of my criticism out of the way, and then we can talk about the positives. So like my one of my main criticism here is that we're thinking, or at least the articles that we're referencing are thinking primarily from the perspective of the developers. I think there's and that's where we come in, right? We tend to think about the end user and the interactions that they have with these NPCs. And so I'm thinking that ultimately there has to be some UX person at the end of this, or human factors, person that is thinking about how a player character is going to approach these NPCs, what the entry point is, and think about all the potential points of entry. And it might be, first generation AI NPCs, have some sort of pre-scripted thing.
Mhm.
And then that is where it starts. And then you can go anywhere within the conversation. But the goal of that NPC will be to guide you to do X quest or whatever it is, right? And so having some consideration about how the user gets to from point A to point Z with all those different conversation points in the middle is going to be an interesting problem to solve. And I just think that when we look at this tech through the lens of these articles, it's mainly focused on, oh, this is going to make a developer's life easier because then they can, spend more time crafting the story and the narrative. But what if this doesn't work? What if this competes with the narrative in some way or breaks the narrative? Is it going to be a stronger experience because you can interact with this NPC in a variety of ways? Or is it going to be a weaker experience because it then goes against the narrative that is trying to be told by this story? And so there's going to be some interesting things, and maybe it's not for every NPC and it's for some select ones. So that's like one of the main criticisms I have about looking at these articles through that lens. There's all the general AI related things, and I'm going to try to stay away from like the doomsday stuff. We already did a whole episode on that. If you want to go listen to it.
Many of them.
But but I mean, I think this is really interesting for a couple different reasons. So thinking about using technology um to create this naturalistic dialogue between humans and digital agents. That's what I'm going to call them, because we're not just talking about NPCs here. We're talking about digital agents when it comes to training exercises, or when it comes to, I brought this up during the pre-show, but like chatbots for companies, that if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem, you could have a digital agent that is operating off of some knowledge base. I think it's the same thing here. It's the same concept, where you are talking with, ultimately what this comes down to is talking with AI in a digital space to accomplish some goal. In the form of a video game, that's entertainment, enjoyment. When it comes to, using a software and trying to troubleshoot that software and talking with a digital agent, then that's the goal, is to fix your problem, whatever you're dealing with there. But then there's also the whole application of healthcare, which Alex brought up earlier in the pre-show. There's all these different applications, but at the core of it, you're trying to prime this AI agent with a goal and having a naturalistic conversation between you yourself and this digital agent, to the point where it is either more fluid than you might have in another setting. So like in the case of an NPC, a video game NPC, it might be stiff because you have sort of this decision tree of like how the NPC reacts to various inputs. Same thing might happen with a chatbot, right? You might have some sort of predetermined responses, but this then changes that interaction. And so I'm excited about it. I think there's all these, like I said, we've done many episodes on AI, the dangers of it. There's I was alluding to it earlier, but what happens when you start having interactions with NPCs or digital agents that are then more enjoyable than interacting with humans? Are we going to prefer that type of interaction? And then, because of the nature of the technology that these things are built off, which is large language models, which is how we as humans communicate with each other, which is why if you ask any of the other large language models that are out there, and you say please and thank you, you're more likely to get better responses, because that's what humans do. Yeah. We say, would you please do this, and thank you, and you're likely to get better responses. And so what happens when we start crafting these like surreal, more enjoyable experiences, and we start to prefer those, and then these large language models, do they then re-ingest that information and reinterpret? I'm getting off on like some wild tangents here, but this is just where my mind is at, because I think, criticisms aside, this is really cool. It can make things really accessible to a lot of different people, especially those who sort of encounter some of these, let's say, social anxieties around saying something stupid to somebody, or saying the wrong thing, or I'm sure all of us have ruminated over something that we said in a conversation. Go, why'd you do that? Why did you do that? And with this, it just doesn't matter, because whatever was one little thing, and if it's really important to the story or whatever, I'm sure you could go into the history and say, okay, I never said that, delete it. And that's another type of interesting piece with all this that is just got my mind racing. I've been going on though, Barry. Where are your thoughts with all this?
So something you said earlier, which sparked a bit of a brain thing. So I'm going to take us on a different tangent. Just
okay, let's do it.
This might go a little way or a long way, but I don't know.
Get me off this ledge.
At the ergonomics conference this year, we had a presentation that was talking about the differences between HF and UX, right? Because we say on this show, and we say, I normally say quite a lot, HF, UX, all part of the same thing, all part of the same family. But actually, this presentation, that was given by Mark Loughton and supported by Amanda Widdowson, was highlighted a whole bunch of stuff that UXs do that HF doesn't, and that HF does and UX does. So it had the whole Venn diagram, right? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you said earlier about HF and UX being applied to this type of thing, and looking at things like edge cases and making it really engaging, going down the story and all this sort of stuff. And I was wondering, is this a really good example of where HF and UX actually do different things? Because this is all driven to engage the user, engage the player at the end, and therefore make it delightful. I quite often talk about the difference between HF and UX being almost like a vase, and the top of the vase is UXers doing things to delight your customer, to delight the person, the user at the end of it, and HF being at the bottom, making sure it's done all properly. It's done to the right safety standards, it's done to the right standards, and it's almost it's a bottom up approach. But you will always end up with a product in the middle. I kind of see from the way you described it earlier as UX would be brilliant here at making sure that the road of the NPC absolutely contributes to the delight of the player, of the delight of the person, of the user at the end of it. The human factors aspect of it is making sure that the edge cases are looked after, that we don't fall off into some sort of uncanny valley and some sort of dangerous. It's almost looking at the handrails they called them, making sure that the handrails are there and they're appropriate, and we can onboard and offboard people properly. But they are almost they're two very different aspects of the same thing, and I think, and I'd be interested in your thoughts. Is that an example of where HF and UX is different but contribute to the same product?
I don't think so. I think there's like, well, I mean, like from my perspective, there's the Venn diagram exists with this too, right? I don't think the UXers would, shun the guardrails at all. I think, in fact, they would embrace those guardrails, but I think they would build upon the research of human factors practitioners.
Exactly.
Like, so,
yes.
So they are taking those findings, right, and applying them in a real world context of, secondary research is a huge thing that UXers do. They go out and do research on what exists today and the fundamentals of it, or at least they should. At least that's my opinion of it. And so when they do that, they are looking at what guardrails have human factors practitioners come up with. And I think because they don't need to do the foundational research of setting up those guardrails, then they can focus on things like perhaps, and maybe this is what you're getting at, right? Where they don't necessarily have to do that research, but that's where the research comes in and that's where they apply it. And then because it's applied, now they can focus on getting us over that second half of making it enjoyable, entertaining. And I think this would largely depend on the industry.
I mean, if we, that's I guess that's almost what I mean. If taking this article in its true, in its base meaning at the moment, where we're talking about gaming, we talked about all them bits, you'd still, and I guess you did, while shunning my my definition, you then went on and embraced it. So clearly I think I'm right. But no, there is definitely there's definitely something there about the about making sure that the engagement of it is an enjoyable and the right thing to do. But also making sure it is built on, because I mean, if you sort of say that yes, the HF people would have got it, built that foundation already, but in something like this, we're not going to have done that yet. I mean, who's built these handrails at the moment? I mean, it's brand new. I would lay down a gauntlet and say that the guardrails haven't truly been thought of from an HF perspective. I bet they've put in some I won't call them half baked, but I bet they're not really thoroughly thought through yet. And that's, I would see, as being a really good human factors role right there, for then the UX people to pick up and play with and run with, would be, I think, a really cool, not delineation between the two, but showing where the two come together.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think this largely depends on the industry, right? Because the role of a video game is to create enjoyment. And so that is going to have a very different fundamental purpose than any other app or tool that is meant to do a task for you. And so I think it differs in this context where that is maybe enumerated more significantly than in other contexts where, they are perhaps doing that. Venn diagram is more of an overlap, but you're right. I fine. Yes, I will concede to that point.
Yes. Sorry.
I want to bring up some other stuff here. So, there's Ghostwriter, which is another technology that Ubisoft is using, and they're using this in some of their tech coming out here, and it's basically the same thing, but for Ubisoft's. And I'm bringing this up because I want to comment on the ability to learn from these things, and so the and this kind of gets at what I was saying earlier about making these enjoyable interactions and maybe perhaps more enjoyable than human interactions. And if these systems can learn what types of things the human is approaching these contexts with these digital agents is like, then they can learn how to better respond to them. For example, in a training scenario, I come up to you, an NPC, Barry, and you say to me, "Good day, sir. Would you like to do A, B, or C?" And I say, "I don't want to do any of those things. I would like to do D." And then you have another piece of data that says, "My goal when I come to you is to do D." And then you, as an NPC, can learn over time that you might start offering B, C, and D instead of A, B, and C, because no one ever says A. And so then you can start to react to how you convey that information, right? And I think this is where it gets really interesting, is because if this technology is cloud-based, if it's based on large language models, well, you can update the technology that's behind the scenes, and these things get better over time. And so I'm thinking that, like, if you have a scenario where, let's say you play a game in 2023, and then you have this technology with AI agents that you interact with, and they say one thing, and then you decide to replay the game in 2028, 5 years later, is it going to be an entirely different game because they're going to be reacting to you in different ways?
Because it's
Are the
evolved.
playthroughs going to be different because they have a new data set? Is it going to be fundamentally a different game, or because some of the main story beats are the same, it's going to be it's going to be the same game just with different dialogue? And will that change your perception of it over time? And how does that work for training purposes?
I
How
guess
do you evaluate the training efficacy and efficiency of different data sets across each other if they're learning within themselves? Go ahead. I cut you
so
off.
there would be, I guess, from the gaming perspective, it'd be interesting to see whether you allowed the game to evolve in the way that you describe, which from a gamer's perspective, from a user's perspective, that sounds great, because that means that the game would always, it'd always be fresh, wouldn't it? It would always be a new something to go and engage with all of the time. But then does that mean that the game's manufacturers are going to lose revenue because they're not going to be able to send out like version 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all that sort of stuff? So what they might end up doing is getting the feed, so using the NPC feedback, say, well, I'm always getting asked for option D, and that gets fed back to the game, to the manufacturers, and that gives them an automated, effectively, backlog of what the next version of the game needs to look like, and what it needs to have in it to then be almost guaranteed success. Which would it's evolutionary, but almost bringing the capitalist element back into it.
Yeah,
Um,
it does make sense for a live service game to have that, right? Like where
Mm.
the monthly subscription, those types of games. It's more interesting, I think, when you think about like the games that are static, right? If they update it, because the whole reason I bring this up is because the NVIDIA stuff is done in the cloud, and
Yes.
so that way it doesn't do processing local to the machine. So
Okay,
what can it do both?
you can do both. Yes.
Okay, so if it's done local to the machine, then it's it could potentially learn over time if you code that in. But the cloud is going to be where it's really interesting,
Yeah.
because that's where it keeps getting fed data, keeps getting updated with the next language model, could switch language models entirely, um, or it could use its own, homebrew solution to it all, which is just fascinating. It's all fascinating, because then that would largely dictate, like, you could games would have infinite replayability, and if it's a service game, then the capitalism comes in, and people would just
And the happy
keep
days,
playing
really.
and just play again. So, I mean, that's all interesting. I think when you look at some of these this sophisticated technology, right? I think there's uh, I can sense a desire to potentially do this for like all NPCs. Is that going to be the right approach? In a training scenario, it might be, because then you have all these different elements that could play together. Like, do other digital agents react to something that another digital agent has said? Is that information known? Is there a radius on that then, an NPC over there doesn't know what this NPC said? And are they siloed? And that whole like technology piece is really interesting to me, because then that mimics a real life scenario a little bit more. But then talking about these like crafted experiences, um, would it make more sense in like a video game for nothing to be siloed, but pretend siloed? So that way the next NPC that you talk to isn't relaying the same information that the first one did. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so like in a training scenario, it makes sense to talk to multiple people, get their perspectives on it. I'm thinking about like, like a training for an eyewitness of some tragedy, right? Like you go up and you talk to these people about what happened. You try to get the story. And this NPC says one thing, and then this other NPC says something similar, but slightly different, but they don't know what the other NPC has said. And so it's up to the person's job to interpret everything. I just think about like the connected piece behind the scenes of like the different types of instances that you would need them to be connected versus disconnected. And that's also it would contribute largely to what the end user's goal is in those cases.
Yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff around this that I think gets deeper and deeper. So if you've got, I mean, if you want to create a new training scenario, for example, then the ability to have some basic NPCs with decent AI behavior, so they can walk, talk, interact, and do them sort of things. That means you could fill up a training scenario really quickly with, say, everything from like a crowded town center all the way through to a village or something like that. But then you could have almost specialists. Do you focus your effort on having like maybe 30 to 100 standard NPC AI characters, but then you maybe have one or two specialist ones that are key, and you then go in, you spend a lot of effort developing them to be super good, because actually they could maybe lead some of the others as well. There's maybe some hierarchical capability that you could have at this point, which would then get interesting, and how they would organize and make that sort of thing work. Would you also then use this technology for so there is now work going on in sort of drones and the use of, so if you've got manned and unmanned aircraft flying alongside each other, you've got unmanned aircraft beside you. Could you use this same AI engagement for you to engage with the drone, for example? So using the same NPC sort of technology, but treating it as going that way, and having, rather than commanding it, having conversations with it about what it is you would want to do, in the same way that you would a real second plane type, for example.
Yeah. One thing that we're kind of skirting here is decision making when it comes to like chatbots. And so like that's a whole sort of can of worms that we haven't opened yet. I don't know if we want to open it in this episode.
That's probably quite deliberately, because that's huge. But in fact, by the time you get to decision making, it's not an NPC anymore, is it? It's not really a non-player character in the way that we are sort of loosely defining it, or is it? If you're working with it, when you're if you're make if you I mean, in the thing I just described around having hierarchies of NPCs, is the specialist skills of the higher NPCs. Actually, they have a limited amount of decision making in order to command and control other NPCs or influence other command. Okay, yeah, this episode suddenly got twice as long.
Yep. So I want to bring up some like social thoughts here. Alex has written into our show notes here several points that I want to bring up. I want to make sure we address them because they're cool points. So the first thing is around these sort of safeguards that we've been bringing up, and what Alex writes: what would be the potential safeguards in place? What would be prioritized? Abusing NPCs is not new or unique. Mods can be added to almost all systems. Think Thomas the Tank Engine, Dragons, and Skyrim. Does this give more player agency to modify or less? Would limitations be in place for how frequently a player can utilize voice to NPC options? So I think that that point alone is really interesting about like the modding community. Could you put in a different large language model, and how does that all go against the end user intent there? And I think there's a lot of room for abuse there. If you jailbreak an NPC to say the things that the developers or the person making the thing didn't intend for you to do, can you say a series of chats to it in a training scenario and get it to be broken? Like that's like
Oh, the fun you could have. It's
you could.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, Alex's point about safeguards is really interesting because I'm thinking on it a bit more. How would you? Because sometimes safeguards need to be done in a way that nudges you away from bad behavior. If you suddenly come across with big flashing lights and no, you shall not do this, and it's out of character, it's out of thing, it destroys your immersion. And therefore destroys either the level of training, whatever, if you're doing training or you're playing a game, it destroys really that immersive relationship you built with that game. So there's got to be a fair bit of skill there in order for the NPC to recognize it's come up against an edge case where it needs to redirect things, but for that redirection to be done in such a way that it is within the character of that NPC that has been developed. And if each NPC has got a different type of character, then that's quite a lot of work. But there's, again, I guess with anything like we do in this domain, in particularly in the human factors domain, we spend more time in the edge cases because if you get them right, then everything else is just gravy. It just flows really well. But the ability for that to be done right in this is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I think so. We're kind of butting up against time here, but I do want to just kind of open some can of worms that we can talk about in the post show. And I really want to talk about the different domains here because we've been focusing on gaming, we've been focusing on training, but there's different other there's other areas in which this could be applied to. So I mentioned sort of the chatbot technology, customer service, that type of thing. That can handle some more complex customer interactions that you might get in like a case where I don't know. There's a bunch of different variables. You might see something more like that. I can imagine you brought up like the co-pilot situation with a drone. So when you have these simulations, we talked about it in the context of maybe like an emergency response or a witness program. But I think there's another piece to this where you have sort of the flight and space simulations where perhaps you're on a deep space mission, you want to interact with how somebody might react in a certain way. Defense, similar to aerospace, you have a bunch of military simulations, enemy behaviors, all those different things. Let's see here. I'm trying to think. Education, AI and gaming could spill over into education. We had a whole episode about AI teachers. See that conversation for more on that. And we talked about a little bit about healthcare before in the pre-show. So there's a lot of different other applications that we can look at. And I just wanted to not limit us with that.
That's fair. No, I think almost anywhere that you can imagine a computer, a chatbot being involved, then clearly this NPC technology will have an ability to enrich, I guess, each sector. So having gone from the beginning of this where we were like, is this going to be a long and interesting time? Clearly, the usage of this could be quite good. I think there's going to be there is a broad range of application if we think outside the box a bit more, but there is a lot of human factors and UX influence that is needed to make sure that it's safe, but also really, really effective.
Yeah, it's. Hey, did you just do a safe and effective plug?
Oh, inadvertently I did. That was clever.
That was clever.
That was good.
Check out Safe and Effective. I think that's going to be it for this this story here. We'll wrap up here. We'll talk a little bit more about it in the post show. Thank you to our patrons this week and everyone for selecting our topic. And thank you to our friends over at Engadget for the news story. If you want to follow along, we do post links to all the original articles and our weekly roundups in our blog. You can also join us on Discord for more discussion on these stories and much more. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to see what's going on in the human factors community right after this. Are you tired of boring lectures and textbooks on human factors and UX? Well, grab your headphones and get ready for a wild ride with the Human Factors Minute podcast. Each minute is like a mini crash course packed with valuable insights and information on various organizations, conferences, usability methods, theories, models, certifications, tools, and much more. We'll take you on a journey through the fascinating world of human factors, from the ancient history to the latest trends and developments. Listen in as we explore the field and discover new ways to enhance the user experience. From the Think Aloud protocol to the critical incident technique, focus groups, iterative design, we'll make sure that you're the smartest person in the room. Tune in on the 10th, the 20th, and the last day of every month for a new and interesting tidbit related to human factors. Don't miss out on the Human Factors Minute podcast, your ultimate source for all things human factors.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our monthly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and access to the full library of Human Factors Minute, a weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
That's right. Huge thank you, as always, to our patrons. We especially want to thank our Human Factors Cast All Access patrons, Michelle Tripp and Neil Gainey. Patrons like you truly help the show keep going. And I guess we're going to promote a merch store tonight. So we have that. Hey there, listeners. Do you want to be the coolest kid on the block? Do you want to show off your support for our amazing podcast while also sporting an outfit that would make your crush blush? Well, do I have news for you? Did you know we have a merch store? Yeah, that's right. We're that cool. If you want to be part of the in crowd, head over to our merch store where you can find some of the most stylish designs, including our coveted It Depends shirts. I'm actually wearing a faded version of that now. I like it that much. Perfect for when people ask you questions you can't answer. We also have merchandise with our show logo on it. So you too can look just like a Human Factor celebrity podcaster. If that's not enough, we got plenty of other cool designs based on Human Factors culture. So why not support the show? Look good doing it. Get yourself some Human Factors Cast merch today and show the world how hip and with it you are. Don't be left out in the cold. Be a part of the cool kids club. All right. Well, there's that. I don't know. Are those a waste of time? I don't know. We have a merch store.
They do things for me. You have no idea. They're brilliant.
Okay, great. We have a merch store. Go check it out. All right.
It came from.
Yeah, switching gears to something that is less embarrassing than that. Let's talk about It Came From. This is where we search all over the internet to bring you topics the community is talking about. If you find any of these answers useful, give us a like wherever you're watching or listening to help other people find this stuff. Likes are it's dumb that they work, but they work. All right, let's talk about this first one here. This is by Luella on TikTok. Yeah, we got a TikTok one tonight. Check that out. Difference between HFE and human systems engineering. What about human systems engineering? What is the difference between human factors engineering and human systems engineering? Barry, what are your thoughts on this?
For me, potato. I largely think that they're both roughly the same thing. And to put it into context, and I think it largely it could be almost a UK US thing as well to a certain extent. That there'll be slightly different definitions, such as when we talk about HFI and HSI, so human factors integration, human systems integration, we're talking about the same thing. So I think they're largely the same. But I'd be interested in your thoughts, Nick. Do you think they're different, or?
I've heard them used interchangeably. And I think that's true for a lot of the terms that we say here. I think if you were to break apart some of the differences at like the very specific levels, human factors engineering might be more broad, that can encompass things like products, services, systems, etc. Where human systems engineering might be more focused on systems. Like that is legitimately the only difference that I can think about when you start to break down those two terms. They're used pretty interchangeably. And just a side note, when I saw your notes here, I read potato and was
That's the point. That's
okay. Yep, that's the point. All right, let's get into this next one here. What do you or have you done in human factors? This is by Cloudkill37 from the Human Factors subreddit. As someone interested in human factors, what's a typical day for a human factors engineer like? And what are some common tasks or projects that they work on? How do they collaborate with other professionals in their organization? Barry.
typical day. What is that? So I guess in large handfuls, it's things like early human factors analysis. It's things like doing task analysis to find out what's going on, user engagement, interface design type work. We don't tend to have typical days, and it's one of the reasons I love the job.
Yeah.
Is yes, in large handfuls, you end up doing some of the same things. So I will do a task analysis on a variety of different jobs. I do like throwing out task analysis out there as a basic. For me, it's a basic building block of almost every project we do. Because otherwise, how do you know how you're going to change it? But that's not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody does it the same way. And then you will generally go through some sort of, I guess, design development-y, researchy type phase where you'll find out actually what it is you're meant to do and then design something to go and meet them sort of needs. And then you'll do some assessment on it, somewhat iteratively. And then at some point, hopefully, you might turn and give it to the customer and say, there you go, and run away and go and start the next project. But you'll probably be doing 2 or 3 different projects at once if you've got that sort of stuff on the go. So yeah, and then throwing a bit of project management there just for fun and bits and bobs like that. So yeah, I don't have a typical day. It just doesn't exist. But in large handfuls, I guess that's kind of what I do. What about you, Nick?
There is no day is the same. There are elements that are similar, and your overarching goal is to kind of figure out how people do things, and to solve some of the problems that they're experiencing. I would say that like embodies what we do. And you do that through various methods. And the method that you used yesterday might not be the same method today. I mean, some common things that you get like maybe every day: checking emails, having conversations, and just making decisions. And I would say those are the 3 common elements that you experience every day on the job. But it's going to be different depending on the phase that you are in. It's going to be different depending on the project that you're working on. It's going to be different based on what types of things your end users are experiencing. So I think ultimately no day's the same. How do you collaborate with other professionals within the organization? Communicate. I think
Well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's either you talk very nicely to them, or you start throwing things over walls and send really tersely worded emails, depending on your relationship with them at any one time, given on any project and how helpful you are all being towards each other.
Yeah.
That is one of the cool things about being human factors practitioners in this is you will collaborate with other specialists, either HF professionals or wider, because we've sort of said it before, but HF does tend to be the glue that holds projects together. Therefore, we do get the opportunity to go and talk to everybody. A lot of other disciplines will be more siloed than we are.
Yeah. It's funny. I used to work in a building full of human factors people, and well, I'll tell you that story offline. All right, let's get into the last one here. Thoughts on voice agents and voice user interfaces. This is by VedNT on the UX research subreddit. What do you think about voice assistants like Siri and Alexa? Do you use them often and ask creative questions? Is their output relevant or just for fun? I'm working on a thesis project about how human behavior affects communication with voice assistants. I need some perspectives on it. Personally, I find it harder to talk and think than type and think. So, Barry, I brought this one in for some reasons that will become apparent in just a minute, but they have ties to what we talked about during the show tonight. So, what are your thoughts on voice assistants?
I think they're a nice novelty. For my own perspective, I think they're a nice novelty, but I don't use them anywhere near to the presumably the extent that that you could do. I keep forgetting that they're there. Short of switching the lights on and off, and maybe we setting alarms for when you're cooking, and we've got it integrated into our doorbell system and stuff like that. And for being able to play music in through speakers and stuff. I don't engage with them in a creative manner. I don't create, even though I've got some of the apps downloaded to them to do different bits, because I find them difficult, because you don't know what you can and can't ask them, because you've got no structure around it. It's basically the equivalent of just the blinking dot on a screen. And you can ask them loads of stuff, and some of it they'll know about, some of it they won't. And there's just that. There's also less of an ease to explore. That, I mean, when ChatGPT first landed and we spent time sort of, oh, what can this do? And then you go back and copy you write a prompt out, and then you go and copy that again and fiddle with it in a certain way and then deploy it again. Well, you can't really do that in voice in the same way. And you kind of want to be able to think about stuff and then make it happen, which I don't. Again, I don't find Siri and Alexa the ability to engage with it in the same way. I just don't think it works for me. So I think it's got potential there, but it's not something I'd want to play with, I don't think. Nick, what about you?
I used to use them all the time because of the novelty. And we made a big move a couple of years ago. And in that move, I packed everything away and haven't pulled it out since. And I'm thinking that along the same lines of the conversations that we had tonight, there's some interesting pieces that you can pull from this that would make these things infinitely more useful. What if instead of having, a wake word, it was listening to everything that you said? And yeah, sure, there's some privacy concerns, but really everything's listening all the time. So what if instead, here's some examples of how something might actually help, where if you imagine you wrote a prompt behind the scenes that says, listen to the user's words, then interpret them and rephrase them as commands to a voice assistant, right? And you have that middle piece of technology there, that if you were to say something along the lines of, man, I'm hungry, and the voice assistant comes in and is actually like an assistant and says something, would you like me to order dinner for you? So you're not telling it, Siri or Alexa, order dinner. You're saying, I'm hungry. And it is interpreting the action that you want from what you've said to suggest some potential options. I think this is where that technology is going to be much better over time, is when we start to have those interactions. You can also imagine another scenario where, I don't know, like something keeps happening and you say, I can't believe I keep missing this thing. And the voice assistant will come in and say, got it. I'll set a reminder for you for this in the future so you don't forget it. And that would be extremely useful, right? Like, how many times do you say something to yourself or to your significant other or to your children throughout the day that you're like, I wish I had done this differently or something? And then you have that voice assistant coming in. You could have that voice assistant coming in and then kind of patching that with actually truly useful things where, oh, it's dark in here. Turns on the lights. Like, what? Like, that's really cool.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like that's the future, and that's why I brought this up, is because when you have that additional layer of large language models that can interpret what you're saying and then relay it as a command, that'll be cool.
It will. That'd be quite exciting.
That would be. All right. Any other thoughts on that, Barry? Or are we good for one more thing?
No, I think I guess the last thing is with that is it's almost also having them in the spaces where they can listen. And how do you differentiate between the places where you've got them where you haven't? So given what I do in my day job, there's lots of places I can't have them. And if I walk into my office and sort of say, why is it so dark in here? It's going to remain dark because I'm not allowed a speaker in there. And you've always got to remember where you can and can't engage with them.
Yeah, that would be an interesting problem. You become so reliant on voicing your thoughts that when they don't manifest into actions,
it's dark in here. It's dark in here.
It's really dark in here.
Anyway, yes.
All right. Well, let's get into this last part of the show. It's one more thing. It needs no introduction. Barry, it's been 3 weeks. What has been going on with you?
Well, I've still got my neck and shoulder pain that I've been moaning about for months now. But actually, one of the other reasons I've been away last week was I went to stayed in a family bungalow. So I went to stay in my grandparents' bungalow for the week, and the idea was that I was going to go up and have a working holiday week. So a bit of a change in environment, just to give me a bit of a different feel to what I was doing. And so I'd work in those sort of mornings and early afternoons, and then go and spend time with the family, late afternoons, evenings, that type of thing. So get my work stuff done early doors while they're still asleep, and then get some chill out time in a different environment. It sort of worked. Trying to do both at once, but kind of not. I should have really. And what I need to do is to be able to take 2 weeks off, probably in the next month or so, next couple of months, and actually take some solid time out. Do not take the laptop. Don't take the notebooks, and just let the team get on with the stuff. So, as an experiment about working from somewhere else, it was quite nice. It was quite novel. It did allow me to do a bit more different sort of free thinking, so that was quite cool. But it's certainly it wasn't a holiday. It was more relaxed. I was more chilled, but it still wasn't a replacement for a good holiday.
Yeah, I feel that. I've done that before too, where you just kind of you work while you're trying to get out, and it just doesn't.
Yeah. So,
I have so many different things that I could talk about over the last couple of weeks, but I think I'm going to talk about this very specific thing that I had happen. So the algorithm somehow knows that I have a Dyson vacuum, and it somehow knows that my Dyson vacuum had a dead battery, and it somehow knows that I have Milwaukee tools.
Whoa.
Okay. This came together in a perfect confluence because I saw a TikTok video of some guy saying, okay, you might have one of these Dyson vacuums, and the battery may have died on it. Well, they sell attachments for it so that you can put your tool batteries into it. And I did that. And it's brought back life into this very expensive handheld vacuum that is good for what it is. That has been dead, and I've just kind of been holding on to it, and like, oh god, it's been dead for like a year and a half, and it's just like the battery drains like in 3 seconds. But now I can swap out attachments on the battery and do like, charge it and actually just replace the battery so I can do larger vacuum jobs. It's something that I didn't know I needed, and then the algorithm found me, and it's made my life better in some ways. So that's one thing. But then the algorithm just this week was just nothing but submarine and stuff like that. So I just it hits in two different ways, and it's just interesting how it works, and that's just an observation. That's all I'll have to say about that. And that's it for today, everyone. If you like the conversation around AI, maybe I'll encourage you to go listen to episode 275, Ain't No Stopping Us Now, where we talk about the dangers of AI. Comment wherever you're listening with what you think of the story this week. For more in-depth discussion, you can always join us on our Discord community. Visit our official website, sign up for our newsletter, stay up to date with all the latest Human Factors news. If you like your show, you want to support us in some way, shape, or form, there's a couple things you can do. One, wherever you're at right now, you can stop what you do and leave us a 5-star review. That helps us out a lot. You can tell your friends about us. That helps the show grow by a lot. You have no idea how much that helps. And 3, if you have the financial means to do so, you want to support us and keep the show going, you can consider supporting us on Patreon. Just $1 gets you in the door, access to a bunch of cool stuff. As always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. Barry, where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about NPC Barry?
Well, hopefully the NPC Barry will be everywhere and be ubiquitous. But anyway, if you want to go and talk to me about that, then I'm over social media, particularly Twitter at Baz_K. Or you can find me engaging with other human factors professionals and like-minded individuals for one-to-one interviews on 1202 The Human Factors Podcast, which is at 1202podcast.com.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me on our Discord and across social media at Nick_Roome. Thanks again for tuning in to Human Factors Cast. Until next time. It depends. Give me that music.
I went in a bunch of directions that we didn't expect. I do like it. I do like it when we hook onto different things.
That was an interesting one. Definitely feel a little rusty getting back in the swing of things. When you don't do it every week, you kind of lose it for a second there.
It's amazing how you take it for granted.
Yeah,
just the fact that we can come in and cruise some bits, and then there is definitely some bits there where you're like, oh, we don't normally do it quite like this. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, it definitely felt like a.
Go on, spit it out.
Well, I'm trying to think about how to say it. It's like the ability to think on your toes and react to multiple threads at the same time when we're having a discussion about a topic, because my head was going off in several different directions, but I only had tunnel vision for like 1 or 2 different things, and like no matter how many things you said, like I couldn't get back to those threads. It was just harder to keep track of than it has been previously, but I don't think it was a bad show. It's just anyway, we've had somebody sitting in since we ended the the discussion, and Alex, do you want to come back in and let us know, because you wanted to say some things? All right, you're on. You're a disembodied voice right now.
Am I back?
You are back. We can see you.
I'm back. Yeah, that felt like it could have been maybe 2 shows. But it also feels like that. I mean, this happens, I think, with a lot of the topics that get covered in these. This one feels like it, you could tree branch down into episodes just about very specific facets of this overall discussion. And for some reason, halfway through part of that, you guys were doing some banter, and I was like, I think it would be really fun to do like an end of the year drunk podcast stream of HFX. Or maybe not drunk, because not everybody drinks, but maybe just ridiculous. Like, this is the end of the year. We're going to have fun and do like a late night stream where everyone's just tapped, and let's see what happens.
Barry, how do you feel about like a 24-hour holiday stream?
I didn't say 24 hours, Nick. Oh my God.
No. I'm saying 24 hours. And there's like, I think what we should do is, what would be really cool, Barry, is if you and I got together, got a list of all of our contacts, and tried to get as many of them on a 24-hour stream as we possibly can, and do something good with it, like, donate it to a cause, or, every dollar raised during that time donate it to a cause, have everybody on at different times, and just make a big thing out of it. I've kind of wanted to do that for a while.
That'd be quite a good laugh, wouldn't it?
So like a charity stream kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
With alcohol, because I mean, that's
drunk human factors.
Go wrong. No, hour 1, we're all perky, and that's all great. Hour 20, 21, you try and pick yourself up off the floor for the next interview, and yeah, maybe the alcohol's not the best idea. The 24-hour thing. So we either do there's 2 events now, isn't there? There's the 24-hour live stream interview-a-thon that we're going to raise loads of money for charity, and then there's Alex's other idea about where we just basically come with bottles of gin and just talk human factors and see what happens at the end of the hour.
That's what we do during the pre-show and post-show, just without the alcohol. So I mean,
you're assuming this is water. I'm just saying.
I'm glad you guys are back. I enjoyed this topic. Again, I think it seems like any of the shows that are done where AI is the topic in there, whether it's ChatGPT or other AI systems, that it can always go much longer. Like it could be, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, our shows are going to be a series of this topic where we're going to focus, in each of the shows on a specific domain that this topic brings up, and stick within that domain for that show and then move forward. I personally, as a consumer of this separately to being a lab member, would enjoy that, but definitely gauge interest before that's a dive that happens and it flops really hard. But that seems like a place that it could go.
I think you're right. I mean, certainly talking about AI and stuff it's very much of the moment. There's just when you think that we've exhausted the bits of AI we can talk about, we can't mention ChatGPT on yet another episode. There's another reason to bring an AI flex into things because of what's happening. Different people are finding different uses for it. People are finding different applications, and that's good. That is great. But then it does really bring in some more of the stuff that you brought in through through some of the notes around. We need to get or dig deeper into the safety aspects of it. We interviewed at last year's HFEAs. We interviewed Professor Paul Salmon. He was talking about artificial general intelligence. And when we were talking about it then, it felt like it was a million miles away. Like, right.
ChatGPT wasn't even a thing yet. It came out like a month or 2 after that.
Yeah. And now AGI feels like it could like, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody dropped it tomorrow and said, done it, made it, we're there. Because the way the rapidity that this seems to be now developing. And so I guess I go back on what I know when we first started talking about it, and we were talking about policy and things like that, lawmaking around AI. And I was like, no, let it happen. It'll be fine. What could possibly go wrong? I've now pretty much reversed my stance and think we should be, but it should be human factors practitioners at the front of this and making sure that that it's safe and an effective place to be.
Another plug for safe and effective.
Oh, I've done that twice, haven't I? Gosh.
I heard it too.
So something I haven't done tonight that I normally do during the pre or post show is mention what the stories are for next week. And there's a reason for that. So we're going to do something a little fun tonight. Everyone who's watching live now is going to determine what the thing is for next week, because we have a rare 4-way tie. Because while we were gone, we couldn't promote it very well. So actually, that's not true. We have a couple votes out there that are swaying it in one direction or another. But so I guess between the 3 of us and everybody who's watching, you can just type it in chat which one you want to talk about. We have 4 different stories that we could talk about next week. One of them was a request from a patron So I'm going to weight that in a special way, because they are a patron. And the 4 here are Apple Vision Pro. Here's everything you need to know. Does brain stimulation boost memory and focus? Huge study tries to settle debate. Autonomous products like robot vacuums make our lives easier, but do they deprive us of meaningful experiences? And the last one here, to learn or to avoid AI doom, learn from nuclear safety.
Ooh.
If we go for the Apple Vision Pro one and heavily suggest we're going to do that, do you think Apple would send us all an Apple Vision Pro just so we can be talking from a position of fact and not just opinion?
That would be the hope.
Well, I think it's in Apple's interest to do so, because clearly we are well respected, what
the advertisement say, it said we're human factor celebrity podcasters.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And people, we're influencers, significant influence. So I think we need one each, at least, and maybe maybe another
one for the lab. So 3.
I was going to say at least 10 for the lab, because there's quite a few people there, and they'll all have their own different perspective. So we basically need about 13 of them, I think. 15 of them.
That's some good mathing there, Barry.
Just send a crate. You must have a crate of them just sat there, just doing nothing. Just fire them over, and we'll give them a good thorough testing, as only UXers and professionals can.
Times 13. So you're asking them to send us $45,000.
Oh my God.
Well, no, but it's not quite 45,000, because that.
Well, okay, yeah, sure, because the profit margin, sure, yeah.
But even if it was 45, I think that's good value, because we're giving not only live reaction, live, we could do a really cool thing, but also it would be there for them all the time. That we would make such good points for free, effectively. That all they're doing is lending us or giving us the kit. That we would then give them such good quality feedback.
Like how you changed it from lending to giving.
Very quickly. Can you just edit that later? Then the Apple Vision Pro 2 will be amazing. I mean, I think that's a steal.
So is that where you're leaning? That's the topic that you want to talk about next week? Or only if we get the headsets?
Only if we get the headsets, because otherwise we're not talking from a position of knowledge, are we?
The AI and nuclear assessment, that sounds super interesting and not entirely along lines, I think, of where some of these discussions have dropped into before.
You mean robot vacuums isn't doing it for you?
I once had someone strap a knife to a Roomba and let it run around the house. So no.
You have some really interesting experiences, don't you?
I do. It was my younger brother as a joke. My camera is doing such weird things. It was my younger brother. I was like freaked out when Roombas first came out. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I like the idea of this little like UFO disc kind of trekking around the house. What if it decides to stab me one day? And he was like, well, let's see what if it does.
It's actually, I mean, because we've never actually, our floors aren't clear enough to have a robot vacuum, because we have children and stuff, and that's I just find, well, I'm trying to blame children for my own untidiness. No, that's completely wrong. I'm really untidy, and things are on the floor and stuff like that, and therefore robot vacuums don't work. Apparently they won't like hang your jackets up for you and stuff, which what's the point?
The floor's just easier.
Yeah, well, it is. It's everybody's wardrobe. No, I could be with you on this one. I haven't read the article, so sometimes I can find nuclear safety to be not as what's the word without being insulting? Flexible, as adaptive, as It's very much my way or the highway type approach. And so would that taking that sort of approach, would that stifle AI creativity? But that could make it a good article from that respect, because we could strongly disagree with it, which is always fun.
What was the second one? It was on memory done.
So does brain stimulation boost memory and focus? Huge study tries to settle debate.
Oh, is that based on the the apps and stuff that say do this every day and you'll suddenly become like mega mind?
It's partly that, and I think there's some like EKG. EKG.
That just seems so interesting to be a topic, because it feels like, I don't know, maybe we've all been like gaslit by the medical community at this point, which wouldn't be a surprise, but that like, yes, indeed, that's the reason for those things. Or
so it's looking at transcranial electrical stimulation. So whether or not that is an effective intervention for therapeutic treatment.
That could go interesting places, especially if you start considering, and I'm sure it would pop up, the things like EMDR therapies, which are utilized with, electrostimulation to the brain, amongst some other things that are included in that modality.
And just to be to the people who produce that, I don't need to have one of them. That's fine. We can talk about.
Oh, you don't want brain stimulation?
I think I'll be all right to talk about this without having to try it for real.
Okay. I mean, it might be just easier and more interesting to talk about the results. So they found that improvements in cognition were generally better after treatment than during treatment. Higher intensity stimulation isn't necessarily more beneficial. Studies use computational simulations to predict how the electrical current would move through the brain, helped researchers arrange electrodes on people's heads in more effective patterns. So that's the interesting piece.
That sounds horrific. I mean,
all right, so not that one.
No, Doug, it sounds hilarious, and I think we could have a lot of fun with it, because I've just got an image of some first-year psych students saying, being let loose into the lab, said, go and have a go with this bit of kit whilst the lecturer goes off for a coffee or something, and they suddenly start wiring Fred up, because Fred's volunteered because he feels like that's the thing he should do, and you just start frying him with like sort of more and more electricity, just going more, and yeah.
Oh, geez.
Hey, look, I got extra TENS units. I can send both of you one, and we could all just hook ourselves up and see what happens.
Okay, I'm going to tell a story I haven't actually told on air, I think, and I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to tell it anyway. This was approved by the IRB, so...
Oh, this is not going to end well.
Let me just say that I was part of a pain study where we were... I was one of the researchers on this, and we were looking at matching pain measurements across arms, and we were using thermal pain stimulators on either arm. Okay, these things were supposed to be regulated by cooled systems. Long story short, I have scars on my arms because they malfunctioned and cranked up and burned my arm. I have full on scars from them. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but there's like a little hang on. I don't know if I can get close enough or higher resolution enough, but there's like a little burn on my arm right here. Probably can't see it.
Can't quite.
No. Yeah. There's one on this side too. I don't think you can see them on camera, but I have literal scars from research, because of pain research.
No.
So that's fun. So yes, cranking it up on Fred, to more,
all of that. So yeah, I think we've come to the conclusion that if Apple sends us, was it $45,000 worth, $45,000 worth of Apple Vision Pros, then we absolutely will do that story. That's fine. But any of the other three, actually, we could have quite a laugh with.
What were they trying to? Sorry, but what were they trying to discern from the participant study you were in, Nick? What was the goal of that?
To burn.
Yeah, the goal was to identify a novel measurement for understanding chronic pain. So,
Oh, okay.
The idea was that you would crank up the thermode to the same amount of pain on your arm that you felt chronically. And this was a defense study, and I'm not going to say much more about that. But the problem with it was that some people had such severe chronic pain that when they cranked it up, it would there were supposed to be safeguards in place to make it so that you could literally not burn human skin with this thing. But because I was the researcher on this and I was testing the test before we actually got participants in there, it malfunctioned on me and burnt my arms.
God.
Both of them. And it's like, it's not one of those things where it's just like, roughly attached. You're strapped into this thing. And so like, it's like burning up and you're like, no, get this stuff off of me, get it off of me. And it's like just this intense pain. And it's, you're sitting there with these big old welts on your arms.
I know this isn't one of our topic choices, but I would love at some point to dive into HFX stuff related to chronic pain and studies like those, being somebody that personally has chronic illness and experiences pain very differently now than I did 20 years ago because of it. That sounds
Here's the thought. Do you want to do a roundtable with us?
Yes. For that, on that topic, absolutely. That would be such a great experience for me, not only being someone that is a paraprofessional behaviorist and like in the psych world studying for, my PhD, but also I have that unique lived experience as somebody that has chronic pain and conditions. And that gives me, I think, a better scope on that. But anyways, for our topics, what was the patrons' vote?
Really quick. So with the roundtable is available for any of our patrons to listen to. So what I'll need you to do is just make like a couple topics. I'm sure Barry and I can riff on it. We'll do our own research and come prepared, and then just coordinate with us in Discord, and we'll get a time set up for that. The patrons vote was for the Apple Vision Pro.
Fair enough.
And that's actually my vote too, because I think there's enough novelty with this device that other mixed reality VR devices don't have, that we can talk about it. And if we do it that much of a disservice, maybe Apple will send us a review pair.
Reverse psychology there you go. There it is.
I already know that. So there's been some commentary on LinkedIn already about this. And I know a couple of people who are really not impressed at all. But with other people, but then there's some other people who just blows them away. So yeah, this will be a good one to sort of read into. And
someone on my LinkedIn contacts actually worked on this thing. So
nice. Okay, that'll be cool.
Would be cool to get them on. I don't think that's possible just because of Apple NDAs and everything that goes into that. But
I think we should reach out to Apple and say, look, we're going to discuss it live on the show next week. Is there any way you can provide us a bit of information, or not actually say send us $45,000 worth of pros, but we would like to be able to
just send us $7,000.
Yeah, we would just like to talk from a position of knowledge, or we'll just make it up. And
Barry, look, I will tell you what, if you can help me draft that email, I will send it from the podcast email.
Oh, fine.
We'll make it happen.
That's cool. I've done a lot of that this week. Okay, I'll put that on my to-do list.
Cool. All right, so that's that. That's settled. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Apple Vision Pro. And hopefully Apple will send us a copy, an advanced copy.
This time next week, watch Apple's stock just plummet when the sincerity of our review comes out. Human Factors Cast says it's no good, therefore we're not buying anymore. Stock goes down the drain. Or,
could you imagine if we had that power?
Or Human Factors Cast says it's a really good, well-engineered piece of stuff, and the software's flawless, and you get such a good user experience of it that Apple finally becomes successful.
Finally.
Yeah.
Here's what we could do, which would be a little bit. This would be a little bit more work on our part, but maybe we can enlist the lab to help out. But to do some sort of meta-analysis of the initial reactions to it.
That's Facebook, not Apple. Did a meta-analysis. See what I did there? I was being clever. Could you tell how clever I was?
That was clever. Yeah, we could do that, though. I mean, we could do a sort of a meta-analysis of reactions to it.
It's true. I know. I wonder if I could get it in time. Some voice recordings of people in there. I'm thinking of one person in particular who's on my LinkedIn. I know him quite well. Who has an opinion. But
would love to hear that.
Yes, I think I would too. Well, that's going to keep us entertained.
Yeah. All right. Cool. That's it. That settles it for next week. We have just a couple minutes left. Any other burning thoughts that you want to get off your chest for tonight's topic?
No.
Okay.
No, just glad you guys are back.
Oh, my wife never says that.
Yikes.
No, we had a really sort of cute week this week where she came up to join us on the Sunday. So we'd gone up on the Thursday. Me and my son had gone up on the Thursday. She came with my younger daughter and joined us on the Sunday. But then on the Tuesday night, my eldest daughter, or Tuesday afternoon, wasn't well, and she was at home looking after the dog and all that sort of stuff. And bear in mind, we were 6 hours away because we were at the other end of the country. My wife jumped in the car. It was like 9 o'clock at night. Drove south, and what is a 6-hour journey took her 14 hours because she shouldn't have driven really because it was so late at night. But it was like, oh, that's you go and protect the children and that type of thing. I nearly got back before she did the way that she drove back. But and then she was straight out today going to do to look at hydrogen fueled cars, which was sounds like it was quite an interesting trip, mainly because they're not thinking about the UI of it at all. They've all just saying, look, it's a hydrogen fuel cell, isn't that amazing? And we won't worry about the user interface because they'll have a phone with an app on it and that'll all be fine. But you can't drive it with just an app. So anyway, we're going to engage with them and suggest that they do it differently. There we go.
That sounds like fun. It's always fun suggesting people do something differently.
Well, I'd suggested that we offer our skills for free because it sounds like a worthy cause and all that sort of stuff. And then she pointed out they've got millions of pounds worth of funding. I said, well, we maybe not quite so free then. But we cover cost.
Yeah.
Tired now. I'm not used to these late nights after the past few weeks. So saying that,
yeah. Well,
I was up even though we weren't doing this. I was still up quite late because I was socializing.
Well, you better get used to it.
Well, this is true because I presume we're not allowed a week off now until Christmas. We've had our summer break.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
I'm sure there's going to be a week off leading up to Symposium again, right? You guys definitely aren't going to be burning both ends for like the month prior. There's no way.
Either before or after. I think it's after.
Yeah, we just fall over it.
Yeah. I need to get that off the ground too. I need to send off the.
I need to try and
do this letter.
I need to try and get agreement for me to be there in person, because
yeah,
I'm going to do that this year.
I was thinking about it this morning, and I have thoughts about things, because last year went great. That
awesome.
Always room for improvement for sure.
Absolutely.
If you have thoughts, we have that document circulating in the lab chat, so you can.
Yep.
Comment on that. Okay, I think we're at time, so we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us live, and if you're listening later, thank you for being a Patreon. We appreciate that, and we'll be back next week to talk about the Apple Vision Pro thing, Google Glass version 2, Apple Glass, the sequel.
Cool. All right, then. Well, thank you, everyone, and we shall see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Are you tired of boring lectures and textbooks on human factors and UX? Well, grab your headphones and get ready for a wild ride with the Human Factors Minute podcast. Each minute is like a mini crash course packed with valuable insights and information on various organizations, conferences, usability methods, theories, models, certifications, tools, and much more. We'll take you on a journey through the fascinating world of human factors, from the ancient history to the latest trends and developments. Listen in as we explore the field and discover new ways to enhance the user experience. From the Think Aloud protocol to the critical incident technique, focus groups, iterative design, we'll make sure that you're the smartest person in the room. Tune in on the 10th, the 20th, and the last day of every month for a new and interesting tidbit related to human factors. Don't miss out on the Human Factors Minute podcast, your ultimate source for all things human factors.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our monthly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and access to the full library of Human Factors Minute, a weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you,